This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include one of our favorite journalists, Cash Michaels from the Carolinian and the Wilmington Journal, syndicated columnist and author John Hood, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and political consultant Doug Raymond. Well, this week's show is going to discuss the selection process and the naming of a new president of the UNC system. We'll also consider a federal judge's decision not to dismiss the voter ID lawsuit and debate a proposal for session limits in our General Assembly. Should be interesting. Let's get started. After a controversial and contentious process, the UNC Board of Governors, as expected, unanimously selected Margaret Spellings to become the next president of the University of North Carolina system. The General Assembly tried to intervene with last-minute legislation. A mutiny erupted among the Board of Governors, and the process itself took center stage, with some members demanding the resignation of Chairman John Fennebresque. On Monday of this past week, Fennebresque not only stepped down, but resigned from the board. Doug, with all the turmoil surrounding the process of selecting a president, many were left asking whether or not Margaret Spellings could really get a fair chance to lead this system. Is all of it going to settle down?
I think absolutely it is. I don't know Ms. Spellings, but I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing from a variety of sources, and even some of the things that I've read about her long before she was considered for this job. She's going to be just fine. And one of the things that I think is interesting is I think she's going to be somebody that is going to be a little bit polarizing because she doesn't exactly fit into any category. She's not conservative, she's not liberal, but she is very pro-education, and those that are going to try to label her as anti-education, it's just not going to work. I think the other thing is sometimes when you see somebody take a position, you say, is the stage too big for her? She's had a bigger stage as Secretary of Education. She'll be fine.
Chris, there was some speculation that maybe a deal was cut between the Board of Governors and Fennebresque that if they'd vote for him, he'd go ahead and step aside and move away. Do you think that's the case? And is his leaving going to settle things down on the board?
Well, I hope so. I think his days were numbered. I mean, you literally had sitting members of the board openly calling for his resignation, which I think is sort of unprecedented, especially on the UNC Board of Governors. So it's clear something was going to happen. I think he was wise to go. I think whatever you think of him as a person, he was a contentious figure on the board, and there was a lot of disenchantment with the way he led the board, especially in the search process. As to Ms. Spellings, I think there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered. You know, her signature achievement, and I put that in quotes, is the No Child Left Behind Act that a lot of people have a lot of problems with. She's not from North Carolina. She doesn't have experience running a university system. That doesn't mean she can't do the job, but I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about it. She has relationships with for-profit university companies, one of which University of Phoenix. She's on their board. They've been banned from military bases because of their record and the way they've performed. So I think we're going to learn more about her in the next 3 months. She doesn't start until March. And I do think there are a lot of people asking, you know, her compensation package will approach $1 million when you add it all up, and that's a big jump.
John, when we interviewed Governor McCrory last week, he talked about his comment about this was that a 32-member board was far too large. I remember former President Bill Friday didn't like this idea of the way the board was appointed anyway. Do you think as a result of all this we might see some changes in the way the Board of Governors is nominated and elected, and maybe even the way that they're governing?
I think we will see a lot of talk about changing the UNC Board of Governors from people who are not involved in electing the members of the UNC Board of Governors, namely legislators. I think they like the system the way it is. I actually agree. I think the board is too large. I think we should restructure. I think we maybe should approach it the way we do the community colleges board as far as splitting up the responsibilities for appointing members to the board. It makes no sense to have the legislature control the UNC board, have the governor essentially control the State Board of Education, have the community colleges in between. It makes no rational sense. We ought to change the system, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Cash, okay, so let's look at this. What is Margaret Spellings going to have to do to win over faculty, win over legislators, win over the public at large? What if you were advising her, what were the first steps you'd tell her to be taking?
I would tell her to take a page from Governor Pat McCrory and bring a plate of cookies to everybody. Because she is going
Didn't work so well for him.
It didn't work well for him, no. She's got 5 years, though, to make amends, because it's very clear that the The faculty, the UNC faculty, they're not pleased at being left out of the process. In doing some reading on it myself, one of the things that was said is that university presidents and assistant presidents don't last very long because if they don't really make amends with the faculty and what have you, they're going to have a hard road to hoe. So she's going to need to do something.
She has a lot of masters to serve. Well, NC Spin panelist John Hood has just released a new biography of former Governor Jim Martin. The name of the book is Catalyst, and it explains how this former chemistry professor helped in bringing about a strong Republican Party in our state. It's great reading, and we recommend it to you. You can find it at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com. When we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about the judge not being willing to dismiss the voter ID lawsuit.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I'm Ron Elmer, investment advisor and CPA. I'll save the state $50 million my first year or work for free. Learn more at elmerfortreasurer.com. Paid by Citizens for Elmer.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
We now return to NC Spin.
The lawsuit over the 2013 election law continues despite changes made by this session of the legislature that eased the requirements for producing an ID when you vote. The state had asked the voter ID lawsuit be dismissed as a result of those changes, but plaintiffs said the voter ID stipulation unduly impacts persons of color and the poor, demanding that elections be free, fair, and available to all. U.S. District Court Judge Thomas Schroeder refused to dismiss the voter ID provision and ordered it to trial in January of next year. Cash, the judge still hasn't ruled on the July hearing that he had of other portions of the election law changes, so they're likely going to be in effect for the March 15th primary elections. But how likely is it that this new voter ID provision is going to go into effect for the primary?
Well, there's no question. If you're the plaintiffs, the NAACP and others, you want this to happen sooner than later. If you're an attorney or attorneys for state lawmakers who are a little bit upset because this was not dismissed, you'd like to find some way to delay this and push it as close to March as possible. This way I think it'd be almost impossible. You figure the last trial was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. They'd probably want to make this trial the same thing. So it really depends on strategy at this point. I predict that the attorneys for the state will try their best to have it postponed some way, somehow, and push it closer into the spring.
Yeah, but you know, going back to what I was saying in the rundown of this thing, Schroeder heard this case in July on the other portion. How long does it take to make a decision here? Doug, is this dragging out unnecessarily, and isn't it confusing the March 15th primaries?
Oh, absolutely. And you remember when this bill was passed, the legislature gave money to the State Board of Elections to educate people on it. There's been literature sent out, and it does seem like, I know that sometimes when the legal process gets involved, it can move a little slow, but it does seem like it's moving also slow. And of course, you've got that deadline. If you mentioned a January date, you know, March is right around the corner from there. So it does look like they've got it. That big date is looming over their heads.
Chris, help me with this. Explain to me why the plaintiffs are saying that this unnecessarily disadvantages minorities and poor, the voter ID provision?
Well, because those provisions that were put in, not having, it's taken something away, I think, is what it is. There are people who, the poor, minorities, people with disabilities are less likely to have IDs. They're less likely to be able to get one in time. I think history shows us that. It's happened in other states. I agree with unfortunately, I think this is not going to be settled before the election. I think this is going to drag on probably past the 2016 election.
So we got these lawsuits pending, and even when we get verdicts, aren't we likely to have them appealed anyway, John?
Of course. I think that the judge in this case, and I'm frustrated just like anybody else because we want to find out what the judge thinks, but I think this is such a high-profile case. It is going to be nationally, this local judge is going to be writing a decision that gets a tremendous amount of national attention, and I think it's probably wise to take your time and get it right. This is not an easy decision. There are conflicting precedents, federal and state, about issues related to voting rights and how to interpret these statutes and constitutional provisions. A lot of the claims that are being made are quite novel, so even if you're going to accept them, you have to grant that there's not a lot of precedent for them. So I think in this case, get it right.
So, Cash, back to you. The court's not going to make a decision. We're going to use the new election law changes in March of this year. Now, if the court comes back and strikes them down, isn't that going to cause even more confusion?
Oh, absolutely. There's no, because see, I think it takes about at least 2 months or so for everyone to get geared up for whatever election is that they're being targeted. So there's no question it'll cause some confusion. Folks who have not been using photo ID, they will now be required to do so until such time that the court says otherwise. So you're exactly right. There's going to be a lot of confusion.
Unless they can show that there's some extenuating or unusual circumstances why they don't have it.
Oh, I forgot the legislature went and softened those requirements.
Well, the big thing
here
even is actually training the poll workers all across the state on what the law is. I think that's the most important thing, that local boards of elections actually treat poll workers so they don't turn away people that don't have a photo ID but have a reason why they don't. And I think that's the confusing part, is actually the people who work at the polls.
So we likely, John, won't know until March 15th whether or not this becomes problematic so far as the election.
Well, the voter ID part, obviously, but the other, I don't really know. It could happen sooner than that.
We used those same requirements last year, the 2014 elections, did we not? The changes, except for the voter ID.
Except for the voter ID, and they did not seem to make much of a difference at the polls.
Yeah,
in terms of turnout, they just didn't.
Yeah, people are arguing about whether they did or whether they didn't. I guess we'll really find out.
There could have been an effect, but the effect would have been small.
All right, each year at this time, we encourage you to get involved helping kids with the extra special Super Kids fundraiser. Started 21 years ago by our good friend Rufus Edmiston. We've seen this organization fund things ranging from insulin pumps for kids to college educations. So we invite you to come join Rufus and us November 5th. It's great fun. Some of our panelists will be on hand. Plus, you'll get some scrumptious food from the Farmers Market restaurant in Raleigh. I want to invite all of you to attend or donate to the address below that you'll see on our screen. Go to the website, www.specialsuperkids.com. After these messages, we're going to talk about a new law that is potentially going to limit session limits for the legislature. Easy for me to say.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Each year, our state pension plan pays more than $500 million in investment fees. I'm Ron Elmer for Treasurer, and I'll save $50 million or work for free. Go to elmerfortreasurer.com, paid by Citizens for Elmer.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
Opportunity moves at the speed of broadband, but is rural NC stalled at dial-up? Join the conversation. Attend the NC Rural Assembly on September 29th, a discussion on broadband connectivity and rural NC opportunities. Register now at ncruralcenter.org.
People all across North Carolina are smiling a little more. Why? Because Governor McCrory and the General Assembly cut income taxes again. Lower taxes mean more money in your pocket, money for what your family really needs. And tax cuts make it easier for entrepreneurs to create jobs. North Carolina is on the right track, cutting taxes year after year, delivering more tax relief, and more smiles for North Carolina families.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, "Come on, we're leaving."
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
The tiring and lengthy just concluded legislative session has brought legislators, lobbyists, media types, and the public to once again raise the call for ways to shorten the legislative process. Wake County Representative Gary Pendleton has formed the NC Committee to Preserve a Citizen Legislature and has a stable of big names helping him raise money to get session limits passed. This whole thing is about getting young people with fresh ideas to run for the legislature, Pendleton says. Chris, we've had session limits proposed before, but they never get anywhere. Is there any reason to believe this effort might be successful now?
Well, on the heels of this session, I think it has a little momentum. The state Senate has passed session limits many times when the Democrats were in the majority, and the House never took it up. So it's an idea that comes up every year or every couple of years and never goes anywhere.
Now, you wrote a column this week saying you hope it's not going to pass.
I think it's a terrible idea. I certainly respect Representative Pendleton's point and his goal. But just the fact that he's named the committee to preserve a citizen legislature, we don't have a citizen legislature now. Most people certainly can't take off 9 months of the year, but most people, middle-class folks, can't take off 3 months one year and 45 days the next year. And I do worry that we'll be diffused. The power will be in lobbyist hands and legislative staff's hands. I think we need more open debate, longer hearings. We need to open budget process, and a lot of things you simply can't do in 3 months or 45 days.
Well, they're not doing it anyway. John,
that's the point.
Would we have to have a constitutional amendment to do this? I mean, the one legislature cannot bind another legislature.
Correct.
So even if we passed a law, the next session of the General Assembly could either modify it or repeal it altogether. If we were going to try to do something about session limits, would it have to be a constitutional amendment?
Well, you could have a series of statutory limits. I mean, every session, at the beginning of every session, lawmakers could, in theory, set a limit. But you could always bust the limit if it's not a constitution. I think we should change the Constitution. I think it's absolutely the right decision to limit sessions. These arguments have been raging for years. In my mind, this is purely an empirical matter. I mean, instead of people, well, I think this will happen, I think that'll happen, we should simply look across the country at states that have full-time legislatures, states that have real part-time legislatures, that we don't have one, but there are plenty of states that do. I can't find any substantial difference in the quality of the legislation that occurs. It's just that in a place like Texas, which has much shorter sessions, in fact, they don't meet in regular session in every other year, Texas is at least as well governed as states that have full-time legislatures. It depends on your point of view, but from my point of view, at least as well governed. Virginia is another one that has short session limits. That is a substantial state. Obviously, you can get your business done if you have proper deadlines.
Doug, some people are saying we're going at this the wrong way. What we ought to do is just say to the legislators, okay, you stay in session as long as you want to. We're going to cut your pay off after 90 days, your per diems and your pay. Would that get the job done?
I think it would get the job done. I don't know if it would, I kind of, shockingly, I agree with Chris. One of the unintended consequences may be that it put a lot of power in the leadership and staff, but you gave me an opportunity to get on my soapbox on this one. Let's say they do it. Make sure that you start early in the year and you set the date to get your budget done and give the counties 30 days after so they can be using real-world numbers and not estimates. Millions and millions of dollars wasted every year on the county level because they don't have a real budget.
With the school system.
Exactly. They don't have a real budget to go by.
Cash, how would session limits help encourage young people with fresh ideas to run for the legislature? Chris alluded to the fact a few minutes ago, we don't have a citizen legislature. You've got to be retired, wealthy, or have some organization willing to foot the bill for you on your payroll to serve.
If that were to happen, I think it would teach young people a concept that even the folks in there today haven't grasped, and that's that government should be disciplined. And the crowd that we have in there now, just by their behavior this past session, showing us beyond a shadow of a doubt they're anything but this.
But this isn't just a Republican, I mean, this is not a Johnny-come-lately Republican issue. We've had this with Democrats too.
And I get that, but let's face it, when you rule the roost, you make the rules. And you make the rules to make things better for you, to make it so you can impose your influence. I just don't see.
So do you see anything happening?
I mean, this is a balance of power problem. So the same debate was happening when the Democrats were in charge. Legislators in general often think if we limit sessions, we're de facto giving the governor more power. That's the challenge. They probably have to offset that with something else.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
Clean transportation options can help you fuel what matters.
We're fueling what matters to us by converting our fleet of collection trucks over to compressed natural gas. It's a good, smart business decision, and having the air cleaner is something that benefits all the families that work with us.
We use biodiesel in our heavy equipment. We've got propane in a lot of our police cars, and we've really embraced the electric car. Join the city of Raleigh and fuel what matters.
To learn how you can fuel what matters, visit fuelwhatmatters.org.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
All right, now it's time for our favorite part of the show, the Tell Us Something We Don't Know, and I'm going to lead off with this. It's never easy saying goodbye, especially to somebody you know, you've worked with, and you've loved for a long time. This is going to be the last show for our good friend and director Clarence Williams, as after 49 years with Capital Broadcasting and the entire 17 years of the history of NC Spin, Clarence Williams is retiring. I feel like I'm losing a brother. Throughout the 888 episode history of our show, Clarence has always been behind the scenes like you just saw him now, making us look good, advising us how to best produce the show, and we're going to miss his wisdom and his calm presence through script changes, production problems, and the many details it requires to get this show on the air and distribute it to the station. Dave Henderson is going to be sitting in his chair beginning next week, and we look forward to working with him, but all of us here on NC Spin are going to miss Clarence. His friendship and his care is certainly going to be missed. Not only is he a great director and mentor, but he's one of the finest human beings I think I've ever known. Clarence Williams, we thank you for all you've done for NC Spin, and as a small token of our appreciation, we want you and Deborah to have a luxurious weekend of well-deserved rest and relaxation at the Grove Park Inn in Asheville. As you leave, we're reminded of the passage from the Bible, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." Sorry. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Well, I think we all second that motion about our friend Clarence. We talked earlier about Margaret Spellings as the new UNC president, and lots of people probably read this but didn't really think about the significance of it. She was hired on a 5-year contract. Previous presidents had not been hired on fixed-term contracts. That makes her position a little bit more like a school superintendent, and I actually think that's a good thing. If you have a subsequent change in the Board of Governors and people want to go in a different direction, it won't be a question of whether you're firing somebody, you're just not renewing their contract.
Cash, tell us something we don't know.
First of all, you're exactly right. There is no finer human being that you'll ever meet than
you wrote
Clarence
a
Williams.
Wonderful tribute to him.
Thank you, sir.
He's a Carolinian.
It wasn't good enough. It doesn't match what Clarence means to all of us and what he's done for this company. I want to congratulate the Winston-Salem Chronicle for breaking a major story in Winston-Salem about a lawsuit that was filed alleging a fraud and collusion with the Forsyth County Clerk of Courts with an attorney over a $1.4 million estate where the assets were lost through guardianship. And they should continue to follow that story in the Chronicle.
Good journalism. Doug, tell us something we don't know.
I'll go along and second that emotion and the words that you had about Clarence. And Clarence, I'm coming back there after the show, and thank you personally, so be ready for that. As far as tell us something we don't know, we've been talking about Margaret Spellings. One of the things that is kind of interesting that's fallen by the wayside here in a lot of the discussion, she holds only an undergraduate degree, and I think that this precedent may be reflected in some university hires that we see where maybe an advanced degree may not be necessary if they think they have the right person. And I personally think it's a good trend, and I hope we see it at least under consideration at individual universities.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
It is hard to follow that. Tribute to Clarence. I'll miss him as well, and worked with him a long time ago here at WRAL-TV. So I know he's been talented for a long time. There's something I don't know. I would say the big new study that came out this week from Stanford University, the Credo Institute, that found serious problems with virtual charter schools. North Carolina started to this fall. The author of the study told reporters on a conference call that the study, there were some kids who had math, who you couldn't even tell they had been to school for a year. Their math was so bad. I think we're going to hear a lot more about virtual charters in the years to come.
All right, I want to close out the show with a soundbite that Governor McCrory recorded for Clarence last week.
Clarence Williams, Governor Pat McCrory, congratulations on a great 49 years. But during that 49 years, you have yet to get a good side of me. So you have just a week to go to finally get a good profile of me. Y'all take care. Clarence, I'm proud of you.
We all are. We're going to miss him. You've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read our weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when NC Spin will have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.